about today is based around data sources. Now, data sources can mean a lot of different things. You may even see some logos here on the front screen that might talk a little bit more about what data sources are. But in a nutshell, data sources are how we bring in data into Wallboard, as the name implies. So whether it's a Google Sheet, whether it's maybe an RSS feed, some calendar information from, let's say, like Microsoft or Google, those are just all examples of data sources that we can ingest into Wallboard. So the goal of today is going to be showing you how we add data sources into Wallboard. In particular, we'll be talking about Google Sheets and RSS media feeds. And then I'll even show you how to do data binding. So a really easy example I think of when I do data binding is menu boards, because there's a couple different things that we can do. And let me just go to the next slide here. First, we can display data. So that would be sort of the first thing that we'll talk about, right? If I am showing a certain item name and a price, how can I display that on the board so that if I ever need to change that price or something like that, it will change on the screen. So that's one example. The next example would be how we set up data triggers. So we know how to display the data, but what if a menu item, for example, goes out of stock? How do we hide that item? Or how do we show someone that you can't order it right now, but we still carry that item? So we'll show a couple different ways of going about that. And then last but not least, we'll do a light show and tell of two examples, a stock ticker and then a meeting room calendar. I mentioned that we can bring in data sources or connect with Google Calendar or O365 calendars. So that will be another example that I'll show you towards the end. I won't be showing you how to set that one up, but almost like a show and tell just to get you an idea of some of the other data source possibilities in Wallboard. Okay, so let me go ahead and close out of this here. And let me get into Wallboard. All right, so you should be able to see my screen now. So what I'll be talking about first is how we add data sources in Wallboard, right? Because we need to add data sources first before we can do anything in the system, or at least, display that data on a screen. So how we do that is we go to our settings panel. Anytime you're adding something that is, sort of just accessible later on in your portal, usually it's within this settings panel. And once I've gone into settings, I'll scroll all the way to data sources. Now, you'll see I already have some listed here, but these are different data sources, and it gives you some information here based on what contents you're using these data sources in, when's the last time it was updated, what type of data source it is. So just at a quick glance before I show you how to add one, we can quickly see here that we have different types of data sources. So like I have a Google Sheet connected, I have my calendar connected, we even have some RSS media feeds here. And then you can see that these are the refresh times. For example, for my Google Sheet, I want it to update very frequently because if quantity changes, right, I don't want someone to buy something that I'm out of stock in. We can adjust the refresh timers and things like that, but I'll show you here in a second how we add that. So how do we add a data source and what are the different types of data sources that we support? So let me go ahead and click on this Add New button here and click on Type. When I click on Type, again, remember these data sources are basically how we're getting information from another system into Wallboard. So a couple of integrations with other common softwares, right? I mentioned Google, I mentioned Microsoft. Just some integrations that we can do there is Google Sheets or Excel sheets. That's another example. So you can see we have those two options here. SharePoint lists are another option. I think SharePoint lists are really great because it's almost like going a step further from Excel. There's a lot of permissioning that you can do so people can only edit certain columns and things like that. So from an administrative point of view, you may want to use a SharePoint list instead of Excel. There's other options as well, such as RSS feeds. You can even see iCal. RSS feeds are used usually for like RSS media feeds, or maybe you just want like a scrolling ticker at the bottom of the screen that's like telling you news, almost like you would see on a news channel. Those are examples of things that we can bring in. You'll also see JSON and XML. Now, these two are very commonly used just because it's a very common data format that's used. A lot of times we use these two when we're working with APIs. So an API can mean a lot of different things, but in a nutshell, if I were to choose like XML, for example, depending on what that API documentation requires, we'll put a URL in here, and then there's even some request settings. So if you need to do GET request post requests, etc. You can enter some information into here and even include custom headers depending on what that documentation calls for. Now, I won't be covering APIs and all that today. That's a little bit more involved. So we'll, again, focus on RSS media feeds and Google Sheets. So now that we've talked about the different types of data that we support, let's go ahead and go into how we add a different data source into Wallboard. So real quick, I'm going to bring up our blog here. This is our Wallboard blog, and this is what I want to bring in first as an RSS media feed. However, I don't necessarily have an RSS media feed that we provide as Wallboard or that I can use that's available on our website. So what I use a lot of times for this, and let me just drag this over here, is RSS.app. A lot of times we use this for RSS media feeds because maybe you don't have, or maybe we don't have a direct integration with the website or the information that you want to bring in. Again, a good example would be our blog or maybe a news source or something like that. You can see that RSS.app has a lot of integrations. Craigslist, that's funny, but there's different integrations that you can use, like maybe you want to bring in your Facebook feed, Twitter, Instagram, etc. This is where you would use maybe RSS.app to bring that in as a media feed. Again, I'm going to focus on our blog. So I'm going to come here. I'm going to copy this URL and I'm going to paste it. Now, what RSS app does is it basically takes our blog and it takes those posts and it breaks it down into a legible format. So as you can see, there's a name that's associated with the blog. There's also an image. So, kind of like with social media, right? There's a picture and then there's a caption that goes with that. So that's why RSS media feeds are great because we can easily display those in Wallboard using what we call our media widget, which I'll be showing you here momentarily. But now that I've done this, I'm going to click Save Feed, and we're going to go ahead and copy this URL. Now that I've done that, I'm going to go here. I'm going to type in name, and we're going to say new Wallboard blog. And I'm going to add an asterisk here to it so it goes to the top. And I'll choose RSS media feed. Now you can lower this since we're just looking at our blog. I mean, we don't post every 300 seconds or any quicker than that. So I'm just going to leave it to update every 5 minutes to check if there's any new articles. So I think that's fine, but you could lower this if you wanted. I'm also going to cache the external sources. Now, why this is great is because we're not just streaming this data to the device. We can actually cache this, which means that we'll download all of the media assets, we'll download all of the text that it comes from your data source. So this is good because if the screen ever goes offline, even though we're referring to a data source, all that's been cached. So we'll play that data until we receive new data and then refresh it. So I'm going to go ahead and click Save here. But everything looks good here. This is our blog. I added the feed, so I'll just click Save. Now, you'll see here in a moment that this will update. I can even give it a refresh, which I'll do now. And why I'm doing this is because I want to give it a second to start loading some data. So you can see it's already downloaded something here. But if I click on this preview icon, all right, so give it one more second here. It's still downloading. Okay, yeah, you can see, right, the download size is getting larger. It's still downloading. So if we give it a couple more seconds, I'll actually scroll down to something that is, fully downloaded. As you can see, it kind of spits it out into a raw data format. Wallboard can ingest this and kind of filter through this data to tell you what you want to show. The next thing that I want to show is how to add a Google Sheet. So now that we showed how to add an RSS media feed, how do I add a Google Sheet? Well, first, before I can use this Google Sheet option, I have to authenticate with Google through Wallboard. So to do that, I'll go to Cloud Integration. We can do this with Google if we want to do like a Google Sheet, of course, Microsoft for Excel. I'm going to do Google. And you can see that I actually already have my drive added here. But all you would have to do is click Add New, call it, Users Drive or whatever your name is. Click Drive, and then just sign in with Google. I've already done this, so I'm just going to click X here, but that's all you would have to do to sync Google with Wallboard. So now we'll go to data sources here. And now I'll say this is going to be our new data source, our new Google Sheet menu. I'm going to click on type and I'm going to go to Google Sheet here. And then maybe I do want this to refresh a little bit quicker, so I'll set it to 30 seconds. And then I can select my credential. I'll then select the folder. So basically it looks through your Google Drive and it looks for that Google Sheets file. A lot of time it is stored in the root, which we'll see that, yes, it is. As you can see, I have my webinar food menu here. And then once I've done that, you can select the sheet. So if I actually bring in this Google Sheet here, you can see that it is called Sheet 1, and this is the name of the Google Sheet that I'm bringing in. So a couple more things I need to click here once I've selected Sheet 1. You could select a range. So if you wanted to only look at a specific part of the Google Sheet, you could do just that. In this case, though, I want to use the first row as a header because, right, those are my column names. I also want to, again, cache this data. So I want to download it to the media player so that if, this ever goes offline, I'll still show that data and click Save. So again, you give this a little bit of time here. Usually it takes no more than 20, 30 seconds, and it will have downloaded all of the data. And yeah, you can use it as a data source. So now that I've shown you how to add the data, let's talk about how we can display it. Real quick here, I'm going to go ahead and preview this presentation in the editor, that is. So as you can see, this would be an example of an RSS media feed. So as I said, right, we bring in a picture of the post and we bring in the summary or the description that goes with that. Now, in this example, we're just looking at sports news, but what if I want to switch this to that Wallboard blog we were looking at? Well, let's go ahead and do just that. So really quickly here, let's go ahead and change some information here. So we'll say that this is Wallboard's, or we'll just say our new posts. And I'm going to change this down here to Wallboard blog. And once I've done that, let's go ahead and click here. And let's change the data to something else. Right now what I did was, and I'll just show that one more time. If you click on the widget here, in this case, we're actually using a media widget, which can be found right here. If I click on bind to data, what it will allow me to do is change from one data source to another. So ignore exactly what we're seeing right here. Our media widget will go ahead and automatically convert the data fields into these sort of fields here if it's an RSS media feed, and that's what we're using. So I'll click here on this top option, and I'll switch to our new Wallboard blog data source that I added. You can see all those fields stayed the same, but you may have saw that the data changed briefly here. When I click save, there you are. And I'll do the same here with the picture. So we'll go to new Wallboard blog, click save. And as you can see, now it's showing our information. And now this will continue to update automatically. Now you may be wondering, okay, I didn't see you bring in the media widget or anything like that. We do have templates to make this a little bit easier for you. But basically, yes, you just use this media widget here, you drag it onto the canvas, and then you customize it so it looks a certain way. We've covered other webinars on our media widget, so you can refer back to that. But if you ever want to use templates that are available on our public servers, you can just come here into our templates, give it a second to load. We have a ton of them. And if I type media, you'll see that we have a ton of them. So this is actually the one that I selected right here. So you can just use that or some of these other templates if you would like. So that's how we quickly change from one data source to another. Just note that it's all done through this data picker here. So now that I've done that, let me go ahead and get out of this content, and we're going to get into another one. Now we'll be focusing purely on the menu board. So now that we've done that, let's go here to our menu. And what I'll do before showing you how I set everything up, I will go ahead and show you how we preview this. So this is my menu, and I'm going to go ahead and click on this play icon. Now, this is portrait, so it's going to look a little funny until, of course, I come here and just adjust the sizing of it. Now, why am I previewing this? Well, I'm previewing this because I want to show off a couple of things. Let me just go ahead and bring out this Google Sheet here. And so I can have my menu up at the same time. There we go. All right, so I have my menu up. Now, let's say that I want to change, again, something on this menu here. This is why we do data binding. So if I ever wanted to change the price of something, I could come here and I could say, okay, maybe the price of the Thai crispy salad is going to $9.99. So as you can see, those changes have saved. And here within about, I think, 15 seconds, maybe it's 20. I can't remember what I said exactly, but you'll see that this will go ahead and update like we just see there. So that's just a very simple example of data binding. Of course, I could do the same with the description, the name if I want. Like I could change this to crunch. And again, it's going to save, and that refresh time is basically what we're referring to. And as you can see, it refreshes. So in your data sources panel, if you want it to refresh more quickly, go ahead and adjust that refresh rate, but this will at least help us with displaying the data on the screen. So that's one example here. Another thing that we can do is not only showing the data. So as you can see, right, if I put 990 here, it shows 999 here. But I can also have things trigger or show or hide themselves based on certain data points. So for example, a lot of times what we see in menu boards and things like that, restaurants, is that if the quantity, so that's a data point, if the quantity reaches 0 or anything lesser than that, we want to go ahead and hide it from the menu because it's not available for anyone to order. So just a quick example of what that looks like. If I change this from a quantity of 1 to 0, and I can technically do that with some more of these, you can see that while I don't want to hide it completely because I want people to know that we still have that item, it did go ahead and fade that out because, again, it's out of stock. So not only can we, hide things completely, but we can also say, maybe I just want to change the font color based on a particular data point. Again, if the quantity equals 0, change the font color to a more transparent version of kind of what we had previously. So I'll show you how we do that as well. So that's two things. Again, remember, displaying data and setting up data triggers so that the content reacts in a certain way. So let me go ahead and exit out of this here. And let's go back to another menu board. So let's go to this one here. So we're going to do some very light data binding here. I'm going to make this a little bit larger if I can. Okay, that kind of helps, not really. Okay, so as you can see, I have 3 blank spots here because I deleted a couple different menu items. So how would I go ahead and start making this menu board if I wanted to do data binding? Well, first you need to bring in a text widget. So, right, we use a text widget because, I'm going to display all this menu information with text. So I'm going to, expand this just a little bit here. I think that's good, maybe a little skinnier. Sorry, I'm a little particular. And once I've done that, let me actually just bring this in a little bit. I will go ahead and copy and paste this. And we're going to say that this is going to be our item name. I'm just using these for placeholders right now. And I also can align it to the left, like you kind of see here. I can also use my arrow keys to move things very precisely if I need to. I can also say that this is going to be the item description. And I can also come here and have that align itself as need be. Okay, so now that I have that, let me just go and extend this just a little bit more. Now what I need to do is include the item price. So let me actually shorten that a little bit here. I'm going to copy and paste this one more time. Now, to copy and paste this, you could drag and drop in a new text widget if you want. I just hit Control C and Control V, and that allows me to quickly copy and paste things in our editor. So I just want to make sure there's no overlap here. So I'm just going to move this just a little bit. And this is going to be our price. Okay, so now that I have these placeholders, what I need to do now is I need to data bind this. So again, kind of like we saw when I quickly changed from the news data source to Wallboard blog, I come to our other properties here and I click on bind to data. Look for this bind to data symbol, and again, that is how we bind things. It's all based on this selector here. So immediately as I come in here, you'll see that I have selected a data source. Now, why did it go ahead and already select something? Well, that's because in this content, I have selected what is called a base data path. What this basically means is that you'll always refer to this data source when you're doing any data binding. What it basically does is it saves you a few clicks when you're binding things individually. So if I just click here on this selector here, you can see that I just selected the Google Sheet Salad menu. And if you select rows, go to 0, go ahead and hit this pivot point here. You can see I can change it. Basically what this means is I want to look at all the rows in my data set, and that's what I'm going to be bringing in, basically rows of data. So always, if you see a number, usually that's where you want to set this pivot point. You'd of course click save. I've already done that, so there's no need. And like I said, when we go into our other properties and click on bind to data, it already selects a couple of things for me. So all I have to now select is I want to look at row 1, and I want to bring in the name of my item. So just imagine if I go back to my Google Sheet, all I'm doing is meeting at a fixed point. So if I'm looking at the first row and I'm looking at the name column, of course, it's going to bring in the Thai Asian Crunch salad like I selected here. Now I can do the same thing for the price. So I'll do just that. Again, 0 is the row, and we want to bring in the price. I'll do the same thing for the description. So bind to data, select 0, and then go to the description. There we are. Now you can tell it doesn't look as good as these do down here. Well, I could of course come into our font properties and change everything like you normally would, or how you would use our properties in our editor, but I'll show you a little cheat code. So if I click on this piece of, or this description, I can hit Control-Shift-C, and that opens up a quick copy, the ability to quickly copy properties from one widget to another. So I can select all the font properties, click copy, and then if I go to the description, if I hit Control-Shift-V, you'll see that it quickly carries over those settings. So of course, I'll do the same thing for the title, Control-Shift-C, copy. There we are. So you can imagine, you can do things pretty quickly by using these shortcuts. So there we are. Notice one thing that happened though here on the price. It's not showing the dollar symbol. Why is that? Well, it's because our data source doesn't show the dollar symbol. Data will always not come from the data source how you want it. So in Wallboard, we can even customize how that data looks. In this case, it's actually really easy. You'll just come to your other properties. And remember when I was binding that data, we actually have an option that says special formatting. If I go here to the before value, I can add a $sign. And what this will do is, if I click save, it's actually going to add a $sign before the data bound value I brought in. So now that we know that, I want to show you, okay, so we know how to display the data, and let me just move this up a little bit here. So now that we know how to display the data, how do I make it so that we can change the color based on quantity changes? Well, that's very simple. So also one thing I should mention, as you can see, the names and the descriptions, the length of that may change, and you're probably not going to want, it to overlap the price here if the name is longer. So the thing about Wallboard is we have a lot of different dynamic features that make it so if I'm, bringing in dynamic information, I need to be able to size that appropriately for where it's positioned. So you'll see here we have a dynamic font size option. If I click that, it actually lets me set the max font size. So if I look at these other widgets here, you can see that there's a set to 38, so I'll do just that. So if I set this to 38 and click out of it, you can see the font adjust to, it will fit everything that it can, but it will go no higher than font size 38. So that's very, very helpful, especially when we're doing data binding like we see here. Okay, so now that we've done that, like I said, we need to change the colors based on quantity changes. So I'm going to go to Other, and I'm going to go here to Font Color. I'm going to select row 0 here, and I'm going to click on quantity. Now, what this means is I want to look at the quantity, but I want to change the colors based on that quantity. So down here, you see color rules. I can actually go to rules here, and I can create a preset. You see I already have one here, so I will go ahead and select this here. You could, if you wanted to add a new one, you would just type it in here and click save, and it would add it just like you see here. But what this does is, so you can see I already have options here. Basically, it allows me to select a hex code like you see here, and you can enter in something custom. You'll even see down on this one, all I did was change the opacity. So it's actually the same color, but I just changed the opacity to 65%. So that way when something's out of stock, right, it will look like, yeah, it's still part of the menu, but something's clearly wrong about this item or we don't have it. So I have two criteria here. If this quantity is greater than And you can choose a static value or even another dynamic value. I'll choose static. If the value is greater than 0, I will show it in regular colors, which means that it's in stock. However, if it is less than or equal to the quantity that is, I will go ahead and show this other hex code, which is the more transparent version, which shows that something is out of stock. Now you could customize this yourself. You can even add more rules here. So you could see I could choose a color from scratch if I wanted to. Like I could make something red, and I could say for some reason if I have 11 items, I want to change it to red. So we're not going to do that. I'm just going to hit delete there. But anytime you want to change this preset, if you just click save here, that will change that preset for all the other widgets you have it assigned to. So just keep that in mind. It makes changes a lot easier if you ever want to change the colors. So I'm going to go ahead and click save, but now I'm just going to copy that for all my items here. And you can actually see in real time, it's even changing what that item color looks like. So I'm going to click save here. Sorry. Let me go to font color. 0, quantity. And I'm going to do the same thing here. Font color, 0, quantity, and select your rules. So rules, quantity, there we are. So I'm going to click save. And let me just make sure that this one is good too, because then I'll show you how we make things a little bit easier on ourselves. Okay, perfect. So now that I have that all done, now this will react based on quantities. However, what about the rest of my items that I need to create? You don't have to do all of this over again. Ideally, what I would suggest is start with one item, include all the features you want, right? Displaying the data triggers themselves, and then just simply hit Control on each of the widgets, Control click them. You'll see they're all 3 highlighted, even in our layers panel here, and click Control C. And then as you'll see, it actually moves them a little bit, but I can then use my arrow keys on my keyboard to start positioning stuff down. So you could see, you could create a menu pretty quickly once you get or take advantage of the hotkeys and things like that. So now that I've done this, right, we're showing the same items. How do I quickly change this? Because I set up that base data path, all I have to do is click on bind to data here and then change the row that I'm looking at. Of course, that takes us down from Thai Asian Crunch down to the next salad. So all I have to do is click on these widgets individually and then just change what row we're looking at. Everything else carries over, as you'll see. And we'll do the same thing here. It is a little bit of clicks here, but the good thing about it is it's only really something you have to do once. It's not something that you have to do every single time you design the menu. The whole idea is that hopefully once you make these changes, we can just feed in this information dynamically. So I'll now go ahead and click save. And when I preview this, again, we'll kind of shrink it like we showed before. And so if I refer back to my Google Sheet here, we'll go ahead and change all these items to 1. So right now our quantity doesn't equal 0. If I go back to the menu, there we are. So I hope that makes sense as far as how we do data binding and how we have things react based on the triggers. But that's just a very simple way of how we display the data and then how we set up triggers or change things. There's also more complex things we can do, right? We can tell certain data to hide itself, etc. But this is just an example I wanted to show. Now, I will say we do have other types of data sources in Wallboard. I'm sorry, I know I'm going a little bit over time here, but I do think this is important to mention. External data sources are used when we want to take data outside of Wallboard into Wallboard or connect with an external service. Internal data sources, I can actually manage all my menus in Wallboard directly. So as you can see here, I can set up data tables and include the same information that I would include in a Google Sheet in Wallboard. But what this allows me to do is you can see I can not just only reference image, text. I can even reference our file manager. So if I want to data bind certain files like featured menu items or things like that, I can. I can also even bind colors. So let's say that I have a restaurant, right? That's like a seafood restaurant. I want it to take the same layout as my salad menu, but I want it to change to seafood when it's for my seafood restaurant. So to kind of show you just very briefly what that looks like, I'll go into this version of this menu here, and I used the base data path option when making this. So give it a second to load here. Again, you can see some stuff is out of stock. But if I go to our content properties, click on base data path, very quickly, if you see, if I click on my data source here, I can actually switch to that seafood menu. Again, we'll go to rows here, we'll click 0, and I'll set it there. Click save, and hopefully here in a second, right, all the data changes. So that's, I think, the difference here is that, yes, I can create something. You can see it takes a little bit of time, but it's very, very scalable. So I think that's the huge advantage to wallboard data binding, is that we can make those things a lot easier if we need to. And I think this just makes things especially easy at scale. So let me get out of here. I will call it at this point here, and I'll just throw up some other examples of what we've used in the past for data binding. We can do things like stock tickers, etc. So if you've ever, someone's watching Netflix on the Wi-Fi perhaps. If you ever want to, bring in like stock tickers or things like that, you can actually use Google Finance through Google Sheets to sort of create something like that. Here's another example while that stock ticker loads. As you can see here, we can also bring in like meeting room information. So if you have meeting room calendars outside of conference rooms, we can integrate with O365 calendars. So as you can see here, I could come in here. I could even alter the meeting. So if I want to extend it, I could. I can even view all my meetings. So as you can see, we're listing some meetings here. But if I go into meetings here, you can see that I have some other meetings for today that it will even list as well. So pretty busy. I'll be visiting the North Pole, but those are just some simple examples. So my stock ticker isn't loading, so I can't unfortunately show that, but I am out of time. But I did just want to show you how we data bind in Wallboard and what some of those possibilities look like. So at this point, I will leave it up to any Q&A or any questions if you have it. More than happy to answer any of your questions. So for everyone that is not aware, we have switched our knowledge base to a new doc site. So I'll include this in the chat. We moved to this doc site. I mean, we still have the old knowledge base, but we've migrated a lot of the articles. This is more in line with documentation that other people are using. It's easier to navigate. You can view articles a lot easier. It's a lot easier to read, in my opinion. So this will be very helpful for any of our partners, any customers, if you have any troubleshooting questions or just want to find out more about how to use the system. We do a much better job of categorizing things. So hopefully this should help you out quite a bit if you need any help with Wallboard.
Okay, everyone. Well, have a great day or evening wherever you're at, and take care, and we will see you in the new year. Okay.
Thank you, everyone.
Take care. Bye.